We should go faster. Get a rise to on C2. They'll demagnetize your pose, and you know they're gonna try to delete you. So now you're atomized on hold. You know you better start making your apologies. Stop blaming technology, yeah. Blaming technology, oh. In her eyes that completes you. Every time she cries, it brings you low. It's a mirror side can't defeat you. How can you be so wise and still not know? You know you better start making your apologies. Maybe take another day, yeah. Maybe take another day, oh. What I say to them is hear the sun moving through the days in a state of oblivion. Stars don't owe you anything. Don't give a damn about your nations. Feel the slightest obligations. I mean, 'cause listen, what if the world was spinning off its axis? What if the moon begins to wane before it waxes? Darkness, you take my hand through all the chambers of the underland. There's a penny on the railroad track. If you go too far, you know you can't go back. Oh, I've never been here before. Deep inside us molten cold, no need for clothes or for eyes to see. So find yourself a pair of ears. Gonna be down here for many years. Just listen out for that subterranean river of tears. You know, it's not exactly hell, more like a nocturnal paradise. Not exactly heaven either. I'd say about half these nights. We're at the end now. You're on the ground, and all the sideways are gone underground. There's a threshold between the here and hereafter. Across the river, you know you gotta take a ride there. Stars don't owe you anything. Don't give a damn about your nations. Feel the slightest obligation.
It's Jade. Welcome to another one of the Currents of Virtual Sessions. And today we're joined by Andrew Bird. Andrew Bird, how are you doing today? How is life?
Life's okay, I'm good.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's a tough question. I feel like that, and it sounds like you're grappling with some of these questions as well, because you just announced a new album. We'll be listening to some of the live takes from that coming up here, but it's called Inside Problems. And I'm guessing that is for multiple levels, I mean, just from conversations with friends and living in the world, we're dealing with stuck inside problems and, internal problems and the state of the world, some very outside problems that people are internalizing. So I'm kind of curious, what are your inside problems?
What are my inside problems? Well, I don't know if we want to get too into that, but
I mean, we can do this like it's a it's a session, a psychology
a
session.
therapy session.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Sometimes that gets scary when all your interviews turn into therapy sessions. But the title is something I've had. I keep a running list of possible titles that usually there are things that I think are funny that speak volumes with only a few words, and it turns out that the subject matter of all these songs kind of gets summed up pretty well by Inside Problems, but it wasn't, as some might suspect, about being stuck inside. Maybe metaphorically or something, but not literally stuck inside. It came before that.
It did. So did the title come before that, or did the songs actually come before?
The title came before, but the songs were written most of them during the pandemic. A few got started before, but yeah.
Yeah, it's so I was reading this article about the last couple of years and how people are starting to have like memory loss because of the weirdness, like this almost liminal space that we were creating where nobody knew when it would end. Nobody really knew where it began. So you couldn't put your memories on specific days.
I think
or
it's also
time.
lack of perspective, because if you're not, traveling much, you lose a sense of where you were and where you've been. And that gives you, I actually deal with that in one of the songs called Fixed Positions, where it's like, it's not just that issue, but it's like as you get older, like your patterns get more, you get more set in your ways and your patterns, and it's like slow drying cement, of your neural pathways, and how to resist that. This is like a 2-year exercise in how to resist those shrinking universe,
Have you discovered how? How do you create
well,
that?
I guess it's like, that's kind of what it's dealing with, is like your internal world has to be really active and just lying awake in the middle of the night and turning that insomnia into something amusing, or instead of scary, to be entertained by your internal world, I guess.
Yeah, I've been saying a lot recently, or to myself at least, because I've been having a lot of conversations with myself the last 2 years. But about that idea of if you don't enjoy yourself, I think the last couple of years are tough. Especially if you're an extrovert, or like you, where again you're typically on the road, you're touring, you're making these cemented memories. So did you get a better sense of who you are? How did you spend that internal time? Were you alone during the pandemic, or did you have kind of like some people around?
I have my family, my wife and my son, and that was, I can't imagine a lot of my friends who are living alone in urban, apartments, that I was like, how are you doing this? But no, I've had earlier bouts with solitude, living on a farm in years ago, and that was extreme solitude, not speaking to people for like 2 weeks. So that was my crash course in how to deal with your own personal demons that can't be drowned out, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's so what are some of your coping mechanisms? I feel like some people need to learn from others. Maybe myself included. What were some of your coping mechanisms for those long bouts?
You know, I don't know that I did cope. I really would, but I mean, I was working on something. I was trying to have a breakthrough, I guess, creatively at the time. So I was just working from morning till night, hardly taking a break. So I had a mission. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I back then, I think I found it. Now I can kind of take that solitude, since I went through that kind of painful period of, I can kind of, it's portable now. I can take it elsewhere,
There's an idea about this like personal scattering in your song Atomized, and things falling apart, and trying to kind of figure all of that out, and that idea of like being unpinned in time. I've been talking about this with some other musicians who, I mean, you're an established artist. You've been, you have your career, and I feel like you kind of can make of it what you will. And I've had friends who are kind of more at the beginning of their career and feel like they've lost so much momentum, lost so much time, and that idea of how do you fill that? How do you come? Do you just start back at the beginning? Because you released My Finest Work just in 2019. And then, the pandemic hit. And so were you able to do what you wanted to with that album, or did it feel like you lost some momentum?
It didn't feel like it was cut short too much. There was one tour that I had to cut short because of doing Fargo, but and then the pandemic hit. But no, I was able to do the whole world tour for that. And so I get, though, I wonder more the lack of the smaller club scene and the audience, because I for a long time needed the dialogue with the audience to write, whether or not we're actually discussing on stage how to finish writing a song or not. It's more just the feeling of people really listening in a room to you. I need to play shows to remind myself who I am. If I'm in the studio all the time, I forget very quickly who I am and what I'm doing. It's like, imagine you're constantly listening to your outgoing message on your voicemail or something. You know what I mean? It's like, or I guess with social media, it's like people are listening to their voices or seeing themselves all the time. But that kind of self-awareness isn't always great for the songwriting process. So I wonder, it's that live small club experience, if that needs to be revitalized after all this.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, with that in mind, I've seen you perform in a small church. I've seen you perform in a outdoor baseball field. For this new album, Inside Problems, where do you, in your dream world, in your mind, what would be like the ideal way for you to bring this out to people? Where would you want to tour it?
I think we've got kind of the ideal venues coming up this summer that I've always wanted to headline, like Red Rocks and the Greek theaters, and this album has a lot of space in it, so playing outside but in a natural sort of amphitheater is ideal, I think. But there's a lot of room for the vocals, and there's a lot of overhead. in the way it's recorded, and so I think it needs to be a big, larger space, really.
Yeah, this is where I should note that you are playing in the Twin Cities. You're going to be with Iron and Wine August 13th at Surly Brewing Festival Field. So that will give you the space and the outdoors. There, something I always appreciate about you when you're on tour is, kind of the interesting instrumentation, and whether it's building up sounds by looping, or you have those big gramophones or whatever they were that were kind of doing the whomping noise. When you're going in and kind of thinking about how you want to tour an album, are you somebody who's like excited about the creative process of maybe building something, or having that exposed on tour in real time?
Yeah, I mean, I've often thought of the stage as like the 35 millimeter frame, and whatever I fill it with, I want it to mostly be functional, but interesting to look at. So thus these horns, spinny horns, which I'll probably still bring with me because it's an actual effect that I enjoy, and it's visually cool, but it's actually throwing the sound off in like a tornado siren kind of way. I've always enjoyed like collaborating with visual people to help kind of create the whole picture. Like I thought of my first couple albums in terms of like as like a film director almost, there's different characters in the songs, and there's through lines of stories, and how do you then turn that into like a visual, what's the visual thing that helps complete the picture? It's not like underlining everything that you're talking about. It's like another chapter to the story.
Yeah.
And I really love, it keeps me sane to work with visual artists, and not always be buried in the music.
Yeah, this is Jade, and I'm joined by Andrew Bird, who has a new album, Inside Problems, coming out. And we were just talking about that visual aspect, and you actually recently scored a film, The Bubble, Judd Apatow's new film. How did this happen? How did you team up with him?
I play a lot at this club in LA called Largo, which puts together a lot of variety show format with comedians and musicians. So I'll do like 4 songs, and Judd was doing these charity nights, and he asked me to do them, and it would be like Nick Kroll or Pete Holmes or all these smart, hilarious people, and he'd been kind of circling me a little bit, like, but it takes a lot for people in Hollywood to take a risk on an artist. I use quotation marks because I think artists have a reputation for being a pain in the ass, as opposed to like a career film composer. Mm-hmm. Even though, I guess when you're used to the autonomy of writing your own albums and playing your own shows, and Hollywood's a different beast. You're part of the machine, and you have to kind of toe the line. So anyway, I got brought on as kind of an artist in residence on the score. So I wasn't totally responsible for, it's an army. It's such a huge budget thing. You're on Warner Brothers soundstage with like 15 people in the control room alone, just doing the orchestra mix. And then there's during COVID, there were like shifts of different orchestra sections coming in day after day.
Yeah, because you could only have a certain number of people in the room at the same time or something?
Yeah, wow. So it really, it made it take longer and cost more. But thankfully, I wasn't responsible for the budget in any way. And I was just kind of came in for the last, 2 months of doing the score to kind of give it my whatever.
The Andrew
touch.
Bird sparkle.
I don't know. Yeah.
Oh, well, that's exciting. There were a lot of projects that kind of popped up where you were able to collaborate. I know there was also the These 13, which you did with Jimbo. Was that something? I think I read something where you said it's something you always wanted to do. Did you feel like without touring, you were kind of able to indulge some of these other projects, these passions that you had?
Yeah, I mean, it's the kind of album you put out where there's a campaign and a world tour and everything. The song album is every like 3 years or so, but in between, I mean, it's honestly, it's not. People think you're prolific, but to put out 12 songs, 13 songs every 3 years is really not that demanding. If you're thinking about and working on music day after day, you're capable of doing a lot more than that. So I try to come up with these projects in between that I think will kind of keep me, the process of writing a song record takes so much restraint that I like to invent these projects that give me room to mess around. And this Jimbo album was just something for 20 years I wanted to do because he has such an interesting musicality, and I wanted to showcase that.
So I'm curious about this restraint when you talk about creating like a song album, because there are certain musicians who are like, I'm inspired by the spirit, it comes inside of me, and that's how I create. And then there are musicians who are like, this is my job. I go to work every day, and I write every day because this is my job. That's how I view it. So I'm kind of curious about how you break that down, since you say there are kind of some different ways that you break these projects apart.
Well, the song albums are no, that doesn't feel like a job ever. It feels like you're trying, but you're trying to make sense of this mess of all these things that are swirling around in your head over a period of time. So you're just kind of reaching out and grabbing something that keeps coming back and keeps haunting you, and you say, I'm going to do something with that. And so it's a bit of like, yeah, you're trying to organize your mind, your sort of subconscious into song form. But I don't like, it's like I do whatever I want, and then I say after we record it, I say to the engineer, like, how long is that? And because I'm like hoping it comes under 4 minutes. Like Underlands is 5.5, 6 minutes long. But I'm like, if it comes in under 4 minutes, I'm very excited. But brevity is a virtue, but there's all sorts of things I want to get in there, But you don't want to just put stuff in there because you can or because you're inspired to. But it's a tough, being your own editor, and it's kind of challenging.
That's why we need to get you back on the road in those small studio or in those, small rooms where you
clubs,
can work it out with the audience. There was in that song Underlands, while I was listening to that, I had almost, speaking of like the visual element, the Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory when they're in the tunnel and everything is very psychedelic. That's where I was mentally in that place. So can you tell us just a little bit about Underlands and where you were while you were trying to put that together?
Yeah, I wrote this melody on the guitar, which is not my main instrument, and so I don't really know what I'm doing. But it kind of popped out and it sounded like, that sounds like a really solid classic film score melody. And then I was reading this book called Underlands. I think it's James McFarland. He's like a explorer, alpinist or something that decided instead of climbing mountains, he was going to explore underground worlds. And so it's a nonfiction book that kind of chronicles these different, mines and underground catacombs and everything. And so I had that going on in my head, and I was thinking about, just surface tension, whether it's water or land or, just not, not knowing what's just under the surface, how those things, what that conjures in like the early history of like civilization, of what people trying to make sense of things, and what they, Hades and the underworld and all this sort of, so it's again, it's like trying to organize all these tangential thoughts into something that makes some sense.
That's so beautiful to hear, and I think honestly, the idea of looking back on this time in the future is something that, as somebody who curates music sort of as a daily thing for people, the idea of what this sound in this time and it is going to be, it fascinates me, and I almost can't wait. It's like I've never been this disassociated from myself, just picturing what it's going to look like from the outside, looking back on it. And it is this time period where, we're going to be looking to musicians and artists and their reflections, especially if we can't remember anything for ourselves. I find that to be fascinating. So I'm very grateful to you and other artists for, documenting and actually spending the time to figure out what's going on in your head and put it to order.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And again, Andrew Bird's, good. So good talking to you. And Andrew Bird will be back in town August 13th, playing with Iron and Wine at Surly Brewing Festival Field. And the new album, which was just announced today, is Inside Problems, which I'm looking very much forward to playing some music from. So again, thank you, Andrew Bird. And thank you for watching, and check back for our next virtual session.